Good afternoon, class. In this video, what I'd like to do is to do a little bit more of an advanced tutorial on how to on chess. And in this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on how to checkmate the king with just your king and a rook. So if we remember, the rook has a certain movement pattern, right? And of course, the rook can move this way, can move this way, and it can move this way. I didn't put any of the squares, any of the purple squares to show its movements in these directions because we're going to be checkmating this king. This is all we're left with. So this is what we're going to do. So what I have here is what we call the box. So it's these squares and these squares. The king, because the king can only move one square at a time, cannot cross this line because the king cannot move into check. So the king cannot try to escape this way by going into check because the rook would simply capture it. That is illegal. The king is not allowed to do that. The king must stay in this box right here. So it is our job as white in this case to corner the black king, put this black king in this corner, or at least on one of the two rows or columns, the end row or column, and then basically get a checkmate using this rook and the king as support. So how do we do that? Well, it would look something like this. If I'm white and I'm moving first, what I would do is I would move my king forward because I'm trying to push the king this way or this, either diagonally or down. And so the king, having no choice, would have to move over here. Now, over here, I'm going to move the king, and what you'll see is that there is I lost some influence over here because the rook is not covering these two squares. However, because it is black's move, the king cannot move over here and try to break out again. The king has to stay within can either go only to this square, or this square. So what we would do, so let's say the king makes the choice to go to this square. It wants to stay in its little box. So what I'll do then is I will then move my rook over here. Now notice the king is, so now the king is in check. I'll move these out of the way, or I'll move that there. So now the king is in check. The king has a choice. The king can either move down over here to try and keep some space, or the king can move over here. Okay? And this is important because it determines how you will achieve the checkmate. If the king moves over here, we don't actually want to do anything with this king. We don't want to move this king at all because we want the black king to go over here for the checkmate, because this would be checkmate right here. The rook is threatening the king, and the king cannot move. So it would look kind of like this. The rook is threatening, and the king has no way to get out of that check. So we would be looking for something along these lines. So if the king can either move, if it's checked here, if the king moves over here, what I would do next is I would move my rook once more over here it's like well, basically this is like a stalling move because the king cannot come back up to here because my king is protecting this square. This black king cannot come up to here because my king is protecting this square, as well as this square, as well as these two squares. So the king cannot come over here because the rook is covering these two squares over here. So the king, in this case, the black king has no choice but to move over here. The rook comes down over here. Now you've got a threat to the king, and the king has no way to get out. This is checkmate. Let's go back. So now that we've got a check going on, what if the king decides to come down over here, threatening this rook and possibly getting a draw because two kings cannot ever checkmate each other? So what we would do in this case is we would move our king down over here to protect this rook and still continue to put pressure on the black king. So now the black king has to move. There's only one choice in this matter, which is to go over here. And then what you do is you seal in the box a little bit more by you closing the box like this. The king has no choice but to move over here. Now there's two ways that you can go about this. You could see what's going to happen, go over here, the king will come back out, and you can't move this rook down here because the king will just capture it. You can't let the king out of the box, so you'd have to go back and let this king go back out. This is a problem. This could lead to some confusion. So what we would do in this case, and that's why I'm going to show you a little bit of a tactic here. When the king has moved into the corner like this, and your king is not, if your king is already here, that's checkmate, just like I showed you in the previous section. However, if it is your move as white, what you want to do is you need to technically waste a move. And to do that, you would go out here. When the king comes back over here, you now move in, like so. This king will now have no choice again, but to move over here, and you move your rook here and say, checkmate. So that would be how to checkmate with a king and a rook. In the next video, I'll show you how to checkmate with a queen and a king.